Hello again. Hello. Just came to let you know that this is the Rabbi Orlofsky show. And as I mentioned last episode, I'm trying to mix up my introductions. Because otherwise, every time you click on it, you hear that same hi. I'm trying to mix it up. I don't like to be that predictable. We're almost done with the 6th year. Gosh, we're going to go into the 7th year of this show. I don't want to be so predictable. Yeah. Give it a little bit of a unique character. Okay, we have a sponsor for this episode, and it is once again sponsored by Lillian and Sandy Shapiro, Le'iloi Nishmas parents. That is, for those of you who remember, Grandpa and Bubby Shapiro. And it's in honor of their parents, Yeshiva ben Yosef, Yehuda, Sheindel bas Yisrael, Yooel, Chaim, Dovid ben Yitzchak, Aייזיק, Mלכה bas Shmuel Ze'ev. It's very interesting. Apparently, producer Yisrael told me that after Yizkor, they said, they wanted to give something in memory of their parents as Yizkor, and they thought, what better than to be Marbitz Torah to thousands and thousands of people who watch this show. So first of all, Yasher Koyach to them, and it should be an aliyah for the Neshamas, and an inspiration for other people who aren't sure what to do with their Yizkor money, and they think, what better way of remembering those who have gone before us than to make them the sponsors of the Rabbi Orlofsky show. So you should go mechoyel choyel and have nachas from your children and your grandchildren. I don't think there are any great-grandchildren yet, but okay. We're continuing our series on how to choose a yeshiva. So what have we done so far? Thus far, we've decided to be clear that you want to go to a yeshiva and that's a goal of yours. The second one is to define if the yeshiva is in line with you hashkafically and the type of yeshiva it is as far as the structure goes, based on, obviously, if I'm coming to learn for a year or two, that's going to be different than if I plan on learning for 10 years, right? Okay. What I want to talk about now is two other aspects to that. And one is the derech halimud, and as a sort of variation of that is the concept of learning by a rebbe. And I think these two are somewhat connected. So what do we mean by derech halimud? There are certain places that are known to go very quickly and not particularly in depth. Those types of yeshivas are obviously going to cover a lot of ground. They will technically do a daf a day, with some time included into it for chazara, etc. But you're not going to be able to sit there and work on a machlekes Rashba and the Rambam if you're doing a daf a day. You're not going to sit there and try to figure out what the Havamin of a Rebbe Kiva Eger was on his Tzarech Ian if you're going at that pace. That's one. The other one, the other extreme, right, is of course like a Chavetz Chaim. It's not the only yeshiva like that, but it's the one that people think of, where they go very slowly. And it could be that at the end, they will argue with you that we may not have covered a lot of ground, but at least we know what we learned. You're just doing everything surface level, and you don't really understand anything. And they used to have an expression when I was in Chavetz Chaim, said, we just want to get push-up shot. Just want to get the simple explanation. But we have to work very hard to get there, to understand exactly what the Gemara is trying to say. That is a method that I've always found speaks to me more, because people miss the basics. I spoke about this last time, the fact that there are a lot of people who don't know how to make a laning. And so, if you say, what is the question? What is the answer? Where are you trying to go? That's the essence. When I worked in Derech, Rabbi Lazarus, who was Rosh Yeshiva at the time, had what he called a no-fail test. It happens to be absolutely brilliant. It's one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard in all my years in education, in all my decades of education. It was a no-fail test. What's a no-fail test? The test was, do you know the Gemara? Not trick questions, list every instance of the use of Hagbah in the Gemara, things like that. It was, what was the Gemara's question? What was the Gemara's answer? What was the question on the answer? What proof did they bring? What did that? Just the steps of the Gemara. And you took the test. And if you got an 80, you passed. If you didn't get an 80, you kept taking the same test until you got it down. Because it's not a trick test, right? A multiple choice test with tricking. A multiple choice test, which, by the way, I later switched to in seminary. I used to give short answer tests, but most girls don't understand the concept of short answer. Those of you who are married know what I'm talking about. Yeah, there's no such a thing as a short answer. And so I switched to multiple choice. And I don't like multiple choice tests because the whole concept of a multiple choice test is I'm giving you 4 answers. One of them is right and 3 of them are sheker, but they have to be a good enough sheker that you might think that it's right. So the whole thing is designed not to test your knowledge, but to fool you. But they're much easier to mark. I just have to go down with the answer key. I would give it to my kids and they would just mark them off, So they love marking my tests, So, but here, they were short answers. What's the Gemara's question? What's the Gemara's answers? What's the Gemara this? What's the Gemara? Yeah, and just know the steps. And if you fail, take it again. You can't do that with a multiple choice test. Yeah. So just do you know the material or not? And that's the idea. What's the question? What's the answer? Why are there 2 answers over here? What's the difference between the first answer and the second answer? What changed from the Havamina to the Maskana? And obviously you're going very in depth, but the idea is to be able to, at the end, walk away with what the real knowledge is. Yeah. And most places are in between. They do some in, meaning they'll do a Rambam, they'll do some Rishonim, they'll do some Achronim, they'll bring a Machlokes, they'll do a little bit, but more or less they try to set a certain healthy pace. Yeah. Now, which of those work best for you? You have to really ask yourself. So, I heard many years ago, someone asked Rav Hutner, how do I choose a yeshiva? And he says, a yeshiva is a tzinor. It's a pipe that brings your Torah down from Shemayim. And not every pipe can attach to another pipe. This one might be a 4-inch, this one might be a 6-inch. So you got to make sure it's the right coupling. That's the way you choose a yeshiva. He says, how do you know? Listen to what Rav Hutner says. Sit in the yeshiva and learn for a couple of hours and see how it feels. Does it feel like this is your place or not? And sometimes it might be externalities. I lasted 1 day in the mirror. Yeah, 1 day. I had a chavrusa and he said, I found us a spot in the Ezra's Noshim. 2 shtenders together. And at least when I was there, it was very hard. It was before they had built Beit Yeshaya or anything else, all these other kind of, other buildings. And it was just a regular mirror, and it was safuf, pretty crowded. Anyway, I came a little earlier, so I was able to get my way in between all the rows of shtenders to get to my particular shtender. I anticipated this, so I brought a bag with all of the svarim that I thought I would need for the Seder and kept it next to me. And we started learning, and I realized that I could not reach into the bag to take out a sefer without elbowing the other guy in the head. I said, this is not going to work for me. I can't learn like that, It's too claustrophobic. Other people, they love it. The Ruach HaTorah, that connection. For me, that didn't work. I need room, you understand, to be able to put down my svarim, to be able to do this, to be able to, if I have to get up, I don't have to fight my way through the crowd, to get out. So there's you might just not feel that comfortable in the yeshiva. It could be any of these externalities. So the first thing is you have to decide, right? Are they learning in a way that I want to? If I'm going to a yeshiva and they're going very, very slow and I'm going to get frustrated, so then it's not for me. If I'm going to go to a yeshiva that goes very, very fast and I have trouble keeping up, it's also not for me, right? So, and if I go to a yeshiva that's in between, and that fits for me, so then you're like, Goldilocks, and you finally found, the one that's not too hard, not too soft, it's just right. But like I say, once that comes in, there's certain, things that you can't define that, do I feel comfortable here or not? So, like I say, it might simply be the facilities. It might be the guys. When I came to Israel, originally my plan was to learn for 3 years and then go back to Rabbonis. So I was looking for a place where they were going to do Gemara, have a shir of Gemara Be'in, and also spend time in Halacha. So I looked around and I found one particular kollel. I lasted 2 days there because it was mostly Baal Tshuva who had graduated. And I, although I've made no bones about the fact that I did not grow up from, but I have been doing this since 12, and I think I'm a little more comfortable than some people. And I just remember they were doing Psochim. And he started with a gra where it says Ora La'abasa, the light of the 14th, which really means the night of the 14th, etc. And he started off with a gra that says, what's pshat choshech? When we say darkness, is darkness the absence of light, or is darkness a bria b'fnei atzmai? So this one guy in the kollel says, no, you can't say that choshech is just the absence of light, because how could it have existed before creation? So you can't say that. So he goes, okay, the Vilna Gaon is asking this question. He goes, I'm sorry, that's kfira. That's kfira. I'm sorry, you just can't say. And I said, okay, this is not going to work for me. It could be you go into a beis medrash, and the avira is not that serious. People are schmoozing, people get up for a cup of coffee, people go out for a smoke, and you might feel like, okay, I'm looking for a more serious atmosphere. Or the opposite might also be true. Yeah, you might go into a place where no one ever does anything. And like you go over to somebody and say, can I ask you a question? He goes, yeah, Seder finishes at 1:15. Anyway, and it's, say, where can I get a cup of coffee? We don't have a coffee room here. What do you think this is, Batola? That might be a little too intense for you. By the way, the style of the yeshiva, there's a term that they use in Israeli yeshivas called mishtar. What does that mean by mishtar? There are, it means mishtara is police. So I'll just give you an idea. There are certain yeshivas where they're very on top of you. And they have a lot of rules and a lot of regulations and a lot of expectations, and if you can't maintain them, they make them clear that this is not the right yeshiva for you. Some people can't handle that. They'll get burnt out. Some places like that. Certain people like to be in a situation that's more regimented, and a place that's too loose, then they feel like I'm not going to maximize my time. So that's a consideration too, the level of mishtar. Am I looking for a looser place, or am I looking for a place that has more supervision inside of it? In addition to that, like I said, your average yeshiva, if you're going for your regular normal yeshiva, is probably going to be, Gemara 3-star a day. They might mix up the amount of Ian and Bikiyas, but it's basically going to be a Gemara. But what they're learning can make a difference. What do I mean by this? Traditionally, yeshivas did Gemaras and Nashim Nezikin. That's what yeshivas, as the most part, did. This is, in fact, a Gemara that says if you want to sharpen your skills, you learn the Gemaras and Nashim Nezikin. Now, having said that, it's not all the Gemaras in Nashim, and not all the Gemaras in Nezikin. So that I don't know if people are going to do Maseches Avos in Nezikin. I don't know if people are going to necessarily do Soita or Nazir if they're doing Nashim Nezikin, because Nazir is much more Kodshim. It's much more focused on Korbanos than just regular things. So the Bubbas and Yevamis, Gittin and Kedushin, Ksuvis, Nadarim on occasion, these are the ones that more or less the people are focusing on. Yeah, Makos. Some places they'll do Sanhedrin. But this is more of what people are working on. When they traditionally in yeshivas, that's what they learned, and that's where you'll find most of the past 200 years the Mefarshim on that. The Briskas decided to focus on Kodshim, and this is fascinating. It's a fascinating cultural phenomena in Klal Yisrael. So in Brisk they did Kodshim, and Brisk was basically the only place that did Kodshim, right? And they would do Zvachim, Menachos, Tamura. They would do Nazir, which was considered more of a Kodshim Gemara. They would do Yuma. They would do these kind of Masechtas more. And the focus was on Kodshim. I've had, eventually, a whole bunch of different brisks opened up. And there were, sometimes they're called baby brisks, sometimes they're called, some of them will claim, no, we're the real brisk, we're even starker than brisk, Brisk itself has no mishtar, as I mentioned. There's no supervision. They rely on the guys completely. Because it was never meant to be yeshiva. The Brisker Rav used to give a shir around the dining room table. And Rebero made a yeshiva. But they never set up. Obviously, they never mashkiach because they don't believe in Musar, there's not that kind of mishmar. So there are those more brisky yeshivas where they do have supervision, Tzvi Kaplan, for example. There are certain brisk yeshivas. Reb Dovid Brisk, of course, had a brisk yeshiva. It wasn't as large as the real brisk, but he was seen as the certainly on par with all of the other brisk that opened up. So I've had guys over my yeshiva from various brisk yeshivas or places that became Kodshim yeshivas. Rosham Shechters, for example, which is absolutely fascinating. It's called Rosham Shechters. That's not the name of the yeshiva. Yeah, the name of the yeshiva is Ner Moshe, and Rav Gerwitz is actually the Rosh Yeshiva. But for whatever reason, they weren't attracting the boys, and so one of the Rebbeim there, who was Rosham Shechter, who was more of a brisker, they basically put him up front, and they made the yeshiva more brisk, and now it's one of the brisk yeshivas. When I say that, it means that they do Kodshim. Yeah. I may have mentioned this once upon a time. There was Itri, Rabbi Elephant, and Itri sucked up everybody. But you just can't have that much talent in one yeshiva unless you have a lot of Bachram. He didn't have a lot of Bachram. So eventually, a number of them went off and broke off, and they made their own yeshiva. Yeah. and it was known as split tree. It was known as split tree because it split off of a tree. And then when that started to fall apart, Rav Gurwitz made his own yeshiva near Moshe. He had been originally in Split Tree, and there were those who called near Moshe Split 3. But so now it's like a brisk yeshiva. So I've had guys from various brisk yeshivas at my Shabbos table. It's a tremendous chus to be able to have B'nai Torah by my Shabbos table. I can't do it often because Kanai Nahara, I have a lot of kids and a lot of grandchildren. When they come, they tend to fill up. In fact, one of my grandchildren last Shabbos sat down with me, puts his arm around me. I put my arm around him. He was 8 years old. And he says, "Are you happy that you had such a large family?" I said, "Sure. What could be more beautiful than that, to be surrounded by children and grandchildren? What a bracha, yeah." But of course, it, precludes the possibility of having a lot of guests. And but when I do have that opportunity, so when they come from one of the Kudshim yeshivas, I don't know if it's fair to call them all brisk, but again, one of the Kudshim yeshivas, I say, "You like learning Kudshim?" Some people fake it. I give them credit for that. They say, "Oh, yeah, sure." I said, "I learned Kudshim. I didn't particularly enjoy it. What is it about Kudshim you like?" I find it's all Gezeres HaKosov. There's no Svaras. It's a different way of learning. Right, Meiselman, Teres Moshe, is a real brisker. And I remember it was Parshas Vayikra, so I figured, oh, okay, I'm a Parsha guy myself, not quite a Kudshim guy. So Vayikra is all Kudshim, So I said to him, "What kind of a shear is a kamitza? That when you take the mincha, you have to take 3 fingers worth. You brush it off with your thumb and your pinky. What kind of a shear is that?" Because I don't know. I said, "Okay, if you want to go to the Beis Hamikdash and bring a mincha, there are different types of menachos that you can bring. There's a mincha b'soilis, a mincha b'machvas, a mincha b'tanur. How does a person decide which one to bring?" Because I don't know. I said, "But you're a brisker, you do Kudshim." And he says, "Let me explain to you Kudshim. We'll tell you how. We'll tell you where. We'll tell you when. We'll tell you how much. We never deal with why." There's no whys. So a person who likes to play around with svaras and to sharpen your mind, like in the bubbas, and how things go, and is it like this or is it like that? You don't have that much in Kudshim. I haven't done Kudshim in a while, but I don't remember if you have those Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah famously asks lots of questions. Okay, this is the din. What happens in this case? What happens in that case? What happens in this case? What happens in that case? And it usually ends in a teku, And we always keep our eyes open for Rabbi Yirmiyah when he comes onto the daf, because we know we're in for a wild ride. He's going to ask a whole bunch of different questions. It's like, for example, in Bava Metzia, it says that a certain amount of grain in a certain area is considered hefker because the person doesn't care about it. He says, what if it's double the amount of grain and double the area? So now it's a larger amount, so he cares about it. Or since it's spread out, it's the same issue. What if it's half the amount and half the space? Since it's easy to pick it up, he'll take it. So does it apply or does it not apply? What happens if instead of that, it's pomegranates, which are larger and are easier for them to pick it up? What would be that? And he asks a whole bunch of questions like this. So, but they're all svaras. They're all, thought questions of how you go and approach it. Yeah. So I asked him, really enjoy learning Kudshim? Rarely does a person say to me, "Oh yes, I really enjoy learning Kudshim." I mean, I'm dealing with a guy in his very early 20s, so I can't imagine he's maxed out his Noshim Nezikin experience. So I said, "So why do you go there?" And they say, because those are considered the best yeshivas. Which means they don't even care what they're learning. They don't even care about the derech halimud, whether or not the brisker way of learning works or not. Briskas famously would make chakiras. Is it like this or is it like that? Like this, like that. You make a chakira. The Chazon Ish, who was just so much smarter than everybody, used to make, poke fun at everybody's approaches, and he once complained about Rabbi Isaac Sher's method of Musar. So one time he says, I'm going to make a briska chakira. Says, what's pshat? If you do a malacha on Shabbos, you're chayiv misa. I know not everybody is into yeshivish terms, So the question is, if I do one of the forbidden things on Shabbos, I get the death penalty? Or really, every Shabbos, I'm chayiv misa. Really, I'm supposed to get the death penalty every Shabbos. Just technically, I can't give it to you until you do a malacha, until you actually do something that's forbidden. Does it make a difference? I don't know. But that's a briska chakira. Is it like this or is it like that? You take things apart. So do you like that derech halimud? Are you enjoying this? Is this getting you what you want? Are you growing and you're learning? So the answer is it doesn't make a difference. Everyone knows that this is a good yeshiva. It has a good reputation. When a place has a good reputation of being a good yeshiva, then the assumption is you're going to attract the better boys. Now, I've mentioned my brother Gedalia on more than one occasion, who's one of my personal heroes. I want to mention his son Ari, who's also one of my heroes. Ari was coming to learn in Eretz Yisrael, and his Rebbe said, I can get you into Brisk. Now, this is before Brisk said, we'll have more of an open door policy, we'll take everybody. It was very hard to get in. And Ari could have gone. Instead, he went to Heichal Torah, which was the yeshiva of Rabbi Orlofsky. It was not considered one of the hot yeshivas. It wasn't the place that most people were going to. And I said to him, Ari, that's interesting. Why are you going there? And he says, because I looked around and I found that everyone says he gives the best shiur. And I want to work on a shiur in order to be able to sharpen my learning skills. I said, so what'd your Rebbe say? He says, are you crazy? I can get you into Brisk. And I said, yeah, but, the shiur is not going to help me grow. He's going to say over what he heard from the Brisker Rav and Rav Chaim and from Rabbi Orlofsky. It's not going to give me the tools to be able to grow in my learning. And when I would tell this story over to boys, they thought he's got to be out of his mind. Because who wants to go to yeshiva to grow in your learning? You want to go in order to burnish your reputation, to make yourself look more chashiv. It's good for appearance's sake. Which brings me to my next point of making a decision when it comes to choosing yeshiva, and that is the Rebbe. In Europe, that was the only reason you went to a yeshiva. Only reason. Yeah, you went to learn by Reb Baruch Ber. You wanted to learn by Reb Ruvain. You went to learn by Reb Chaim. You went to learn by... You were looking for the person who was going to become your Rebbe to teach you. And if you look in the Gemara, it's the same thing. No one wanted to go to Nahardoi because I heard that, they have the best restaurants. Nobody wanted to go to Surah because I hear they have oceanfront property. You know what I mean? No, I hear they have a good dormitory. The only reason you went was to learn by a Rebbe. That was the goal. That's what you set out to do. That was the purpose in learning. You wanted to be mekabel from a Rebbe. And in fact, if you wanted to switch to another Rebbe, you had to ask Rishus, and it was a very serious thing, etc. Today, I have been to chasanas of guys who've been learning Yeshiva Gedola for many years. And the Masada Kedushin was his high school Rebbe. And I was a little surprised. And it turns out that was the last person that he had a kesher with. I was at a chasana of a fellow who was learning in a major Israeli yeshiva. And there is a rule when you get married, the Rosh Yeshiva is Masada Kedushin. That's not a choice. He is Masada Kedushin. And someone asked him, they were waiting, to get started. They said, is the Rosh Yeshiva here yet? He says, I don't know. Which one is the Rosh Yeshiva? He had never met him. He had never spoken to him. He was going to show up at his chasana in order to be the Masada Kedushin, and he had no relationship with him whatsoever. So you choose a yeshiva based on its name, what kind of guy. Most of the time when I ask people, why'd you go to this yeshiva? The answer is because my friends went there. And that's how you make a decision. But that's no way to grow in your learning. And I know that my words are most likely going to fall on deaf ears, as my son Yaakov, who has been on the podcast any number of times, will tell you. Yeah, my father is out of touch. He says, Abba, you don't get it. That's his expression. You don't get it. And I say, it's true. I don't get it. There are a lot of things going on today that I don't get. I don't get sushi. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why, for the love of the Lord, would anybody take raw fish and wrap it in sticky rice and stick it in boiling hot sauce and eat it? It doesn't make any sense. With chopsticks. What is wrong with you people? But okay, I'm old. I admit it. One of my kids' chasanas. So my mechutin said, you're going to bring alcohol for the boys. And I said, of course not. I'll bring a bottle for my friends to make a l'chaim, but for the boys, why? He says, well, fathers usually like to give it to the boys because, then they dance more Lebedik. I said, if my future son-in-law doesn't have anyone who wants to celebrate his chasana unless they're drunk, tell him not to come. He says, I hear you. And he spread the word, bring your own stuff. There was very Levitic dancing, and my son said to me, Abba, you don't get it. So when I look at a boy and I say, don't you want to go to a yeshiva where you're going to grow the most in your learning? The answer is no. I want to go someplace where my friends are. I want to go someplace where, has a good reputation. It might even be for the Gashmias. But to go someplace where the main goal is that I'm going to grow the most in my learning, where I'm going to have a Rebbe who I'm going to have a kesha with, unfortunately, that is not the major motivation. And this is something that we really need to address. And because of that, I'm not the one making this observation. I've heard it from very big people. Why aren't the yeshivas producing Gedolei Torah today like they used to? And I'm not here to name names or to question anybody. And they say, what do you mean? Name the three up and coming Gedolei Torah in their 40s. When Shlomo Zalman and Rebbe Yosef were in their 40s, everyone already knew who they were. When Rebbe Moshe and Rebbe Yaakov and Rebbe Aaron were in their 40s, everyone already knew who they were. Who are the up-and-coming Gedolei Torah that the yeshivas are producing? It could be that it's a problem. And I think one of the biggest problems is that people are not going to yeshiva with the clear desire of, I want to learn from a Rebbe and I want to grow in my learning. And from a shear that's going to help me develop. I think those are two of the big problems. All right, we'll finish this up next time. And that brings us to the question and answer portion of our program. Be Abigail, how is a woman covering her leg with see-through stockings fulfilling the chumrah of covering that area if the whole reason for the chumrah is for tznius purposes? This is an excellent question. So one answer is, you're right, it's not. This is what the people in Israel will tell you. I'm throwing around a term here that I'm not too familiar with because I don't wear stockings. And if I did, I certainly would not admit it on a podcast. And I know I say everything, but even I have my limits. They say, well, they tell the girls, I have 8 daughters, so they go to school. They go, the stockings have to be 40 denier. I'm not sure what that means, denier, but it's apparently thickness. It has to have a certain thickness, otherwise it doesn't count. If they're too sheer, then they do not count as acceptable stockings. This is those who will tell you that. And so when you ask, how do you get away with sheer ones? The answer is, you're right, you don't. Okay, that's one answer. The second answer is like this, and that is that it's clear that covering your leg below the knee is based on minhag. Some places they do, and some places they don't, right? If it's totally on minhag, then that means it's not an erva in the traditional sense. There are certain things that are erva, absolute erva, and those things have to be covered up. And obviously, if a girl wears a see-through dress, then that does not qualify because you're dealing here with a real erva. But one of the classic examples is, of course, a woman covering her hair. And everyone asks the question, how can a woman cover her hair with a sheitel that might look better than her own hair? And the answer is because hair is not inherently erva. If it was, then a single girl would have to cover her hair too, right? So the fact that she doesn't have to cover her hair, it means hair is not erva. And that's why the Chazal say, Sarah Be'isha erva is talking about a married woman. They learn it out from a soita. By a soita, it says they uncover her hair, which means her hair was covered because she's a married woman. You cannot be guilty of adultery unless you are a married woman. So a married woman has to cover her hair. But it's not covering it because it's erva. It's covering it because you have to cover it. Same thing with the lower legs. If the minhag is to cover it, it's clearly not a real erva, or it wouldn't be a minhag. And therefore, those who do not have the 40 denier stockings are relying on the fact that covering it is covering it. And I'm Yosef Zayin. That would be the answer. Okay, by Anonymous. What can I do if there are people that I can't stand to be around? Don't get me wrong. I try to work on my Av Yisrael and to learn how to like people of different backgrounds than myself. I'm talking about those that get too close when they talk to you and don't know when it's appropriate to end the conversation. This was a constant theme in the Seinfeld TV show, where they would take certain things and amplify them. So there was a guy who was the close talker who would come right up to your face when he would talk to you. I think it was Judd Reinhold who played that. I'm not sure. They had the low talker, this girl who always mumbles and you can't really understand. So people answer what they think she said. Getting into trouble, There were people who are unusually obnoxious and argumentative and pedantic. And, for me, it's the pokers, the one who poke you in the chest or slap you on the shoulder and you walk away after a conversation and you're sore for the next 2 days, There are people who will fight with you over the most picayune things. What year did this happen? What year did that happen? And they'll insist that they're right and they'll fight with you and they'll, and you're like, I don't really care. And, and you get sucked into these arguments and they'll just argue about anything that you say. Good morning. Who said it's a good morning? Or they'll just say outrageously hurtful things, etc. There are definitely annoying people in this world. There are people who just have terrible body odor, just overwhelming smell, a miasma. It's a word that's hard to use, miasma, which is this like kind of a smell that just pushes you out of your ability to live. So there's no question about it. There are people that I believe their main purpose in creation is to be an Isayin to me. That's why they exist, I have had guests at my Shabbos table on occasion who meet this qualification, and it's challenging, you know. So you like to tell jokes, huh? You have like a joke book. You like read a joke book and you tell jokes. Is that what you do? You know. So how much do you get paid for speaking? It's a lot of money. You make a lot of money. How much money you make? You know, you speak. You know. Do anybody ever think that you're just like a clown and you're a clown? And I'm really struggling to hold it together. But that's our goal in life. As Yitzchak Rabin said, you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. Yeah. So, of course, that led to the Oslo Accords, so that wasn't such a great thing. But the idea is that there are very difficult people. Now, I'm not saying you're mechuyev to hang out with these people, but when these people come to you, this is your test. God is testing you to see whether or not you're going to be a nice person. And like I say, it's not hard being nice to people you find interesting and easy to get along with. A nice person is somebody who can be nice in trying situations. In his book, Dave Barry Turns 50, he has one article called 25 Things I Learned in 50 Years. And one of them is someone who's nice to you and isn't nice to the waitress is not a nice person. Right? What makes a person a nice person is the person who knows how to deal with the difficult people. And you mentioned stopping a conversation. I mean, I know somebody who can talk without a break for 3 hours, and sometimes I have no choice. I just have to go. And when I'm like, I'm sorry, I really have to go, they're like, fine, hang up on me. And there's nothing I can do. Nothing I can do. That's a them issue. So, unfortunately, what ends up happening is when people like this call, people don't even answer the phone. You know, but I try to, and I try at some point to break it off. And one time when the person did this to me, they said, okay, fine, hang up on me. I said, you know, that's really not fair. I've just been on the phone with you for 2.5 hours, and that's what you say to me at the end. Instead of saying, thank you, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, that's what you say to me? That fine, hang up on me? That's very hurtful. I'm very hurt. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. But the next time we talked, it was also a nice long conversation, and I said, okay, I have to go now. She said, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. So yes, they can be taught. So listen, this is our challenge. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us challenging people for us to be able to grow as a person. By Anonymous, how do you understand the Torah allowing us to own slaves? We're permitted by halacha to have an Eved Kanani who is considered property, ki kaspayu, gets no salary, has fewer rights than a Yisrael, and remains a slave forever. How can the Torah allow us to own another human being? Also, when did this practice stop? We don't seem to do it anymore. I'm not sure when it stopped exactly. I know, obviously, we don't do it anymore. It's so interesting. I saw this article by a conservative rabbi who brings this as a proof of the evolution of halacha. It's not evolution of halacha. It's an option to own a slave. It's not an obligation if you just don't exercise that option. He also brought the example of yibum, that we don't do yibum anymore. We do chalitza. And as the evolution of halacha. No, the Torah itself gives you an option of doing yibum or chalitza. The Chacham just say, choose this option instead of the other. We didn't change anything around. So I'm not sure exactly at what point people opted out of this. But let's start with a couple of assumptions. Hashem is not cruel. Yeah. And not every non-Jew becomes a slave. Clearly. And ironically, an Eved Kanani cannot be from Canaan. So it means a non-Jewish slave. Yeah. Why is it then called an Eved Kanani, of all things? Yeah. So the source of slavery goes to a story in Parshas Noach, where Noach drank wine after the flood, and after the flood, the world changed, and Noach drank the same amount of wine that he usually drank, but because he was now, the whole world was weaker, it had much more of an intoxicating effect on him, and he was preparing to have more children, so he wasn't dressed. And his son Cham goes in and castrates him. And he's not embarrassed about it at all. He tells his brothers. And he says, guys, I did this for you. Look, when there was only Cain and Abel in the world, one killed his brother for who was going to own the world. There's already 3 of us. He wants to have more children. So as it is, we have to divide the world up 3 ways. You want to divide it up 4 ways, 5 ways? Well, when Noah came to and realized what had happened, he curses his son Cham and his son Cham and his son Canaan, who comes from Cham. And the Chazal explained because both of them played a part in this role. And he said, you guys will be slaves forever. Why? Because what's the idea of a slave? The idea of a slave is someone who has controls imposed on him from the outside. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu understands there are certain people for whom freedom is a curse and not a blessing. There is stories of people who were in prison and are released, and they create another crime to go back to prison because they're safe in prison. They get fed, they get taken care of, they get, they know exactly where they are, they get their number, they know who they are. They're much more comfortable in a prison environment than having to make it in the outside world. Because certain people need the controls imposed on them from the outside. There are people who are dangerously overweight that they go into programs where they basically lock them down. And they only give them their food, and they keep the refrigerator locked up. There was a court case. This guy went in before they had the gastric bypass. They used to staple your stomach. And he stapled his stomach. And when no one was looking, he went to the refrigerator and ate all the food so much that he burst the staples. And he sued the hospital. He says, you should have kept the refrigerator locked up. He says, unless the refrigerator is locked up, I don't have that kind of sense of self-control. I need controls imposed on me from the outside. We were talking about yeshivas. There are certain yeshivas that have a lot of mishtar because there are people who don't want to have that freedom. They want to know there's somebody looking over my shoulder to make sure that I'm doing the right thing and keeping me on the straight and narrow. Yeah. So Noach said, Cham, you are so out of control that you're ready to castrate your own father in order to make sure that you don't get any less than 1/3 of the world. You're out of control. You need other people to put controls on you, and so from your people, slaves will come. That was the idea. Now, there's a Sifsei Chachamim that says the following. In Parshas Chayesara, when Eliezer, who is a slave, Evan, he was, by the way, a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Eliezer Demesek, Dola Umashke, he would draw and water from the Torah that he got from his Rebbe Avraham. Avraham sends him to find a wife for his son. He trusts him impeccably. Yeah. So at the beginning, he's being tested, Eliezer. And he says, what if I go and they don't want to give me the daughter? What should I do? And Avraham sensed that Eliezer was not being totally free from his own personal considerations. A slave is supposed to have no das of his own. He was supposed to act only on behalf of his master. And he knew that Eliezer had his own daughter, And he obviously wanted his daughter to marry Yitzchak. And Avram says, you cannot marry my son into my son because you come from Canaan, which is Arur, cursed. And Hashem said to me, I'm Baruch. And Baruch and Arur, blessing and curse, cannot come together. So instead, go to the daughters of Anna, Eshkol, and Mamre. To which the Sifsei Chacham says, Anna, Eshkol, and Mamre were also from Canaan. How could he marry into them? Listen what he says. The curse was not on Anna, Eshkol, and Mamre as much because they did not become slaves. Which means, says the Sfas Emes, most of the slave trade was done by the Africans themselves. They would gather up captured people or in battle, and they would sell them as slaves. And it wasn't only in Africa, obviously. In Rome, they had slaves. In Greece, they had slaves. And in every society, they had slaves. They would capture people, and then they would sell them as slaves. So a person who buys himself a non-Jewish slave, so he's there because this person has no control. As we say in Pirkei Avos, marba avodim, marba gezel. There'll be more stealing because they can't control themselves. Marba shivcha, marba zima. There'll be more immorality. And in fact, the Gemara discusses, is it a schus or a chov to free a slave? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And the argument that it's a bad thing is because avadim hafkira nichale. They'd rather, be able to do whatever they want. They don't want restrictions. So I can sleep with whoever I want and do whatever I want. I'm a slave, but at least I have the opportunity to do whatever I want on my own free time when I have that chance. So these are people who become slaves who need this imposed on them from the outside because they are out of control. And someone who is out of control, if you release them onto the streets, as you can see in many major cities in America today, it leads to a disaster. When a Jew steals, and he can't pay it back, so he also is out of control. So we sell him to become an Eved. And it could be that he likes this life, just like the guy who goes to prison. And he's got meals and he's got a master, he takes a place, and he says, I don't want to go free. So we pierce his ear, the ear they heard at Har Sinai. Hashem said, you be avodim to me and not avodim to somebody else. Pierce that. Because what do you want to be a slave for? You're supposed to be able to have enough controls in your life to be able to act like a mensch without having it superimposed from the outside. So the concept of slavery was to impose controls on people who otherwise would not. And whenever it comes to a Jewish legal system, we always say there is another element, and that's called God. Kadosh Baruch Hu arranges for people who need it to be able to become avadim, so they have that opportunity to have those controls. And the final question now is by Anonymous. What does it mean that Yishmael Davens? Do they daven to Hashem? If so, why would Hashem listen to them if they are asking to kill us? So yes, they daven, and yes, they daven to Hashem. There is a disagreement in the Rishonim whether Christianity is considered avodah zarah or not. And the machlekes extends to Catholicism and to Protestantism, whether or not the saints and the iconography and the Godhead of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, whether that qualifies or not. But all the Mefarshim agree that when the Muslims pray to Allah, they're praying to God, to the one God. And Muhammad is not the son of God. He was just a prophet of the Lord. So it's not avodah zarah. And when they pray to Hashem, they are praying to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help them and remember them. Such is the power of tefillah that, as Rabbi Orlofsky says, a thief breaking into a house who asks Hashem that he should be successful will be successful. Such is the power of tefillah. Yishmael means just that God will hear them, that his tefillahs are answered. And therefore, when they come, they're coming with sincerity. They're turning to God. They're asking for God to help them. They're asking for God to grant their requests, etc. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if he feels that there's a place, because remember, if we daven better and we're good, then Yishmael can't hurt us. It's only when we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing, and Yishmael is, I remember when the Taliban blew up the world's largest Buddha someplace in Afghanistan, and there was a national outcry. And Rabbi Shapiro spoke about it, and he says, the job of Yishmael that Avram gave him was to destroy Avodah Zarah. And that's what he goes out to do. It's exactly what they're supposed to do, is destroy Avodah Zarah. You can't really, cultural heritage, that kind of stuff doesn't speak to Yishmael. Yishmael wants to remove Avodah Zarah, the unbelievers, the infidels, and that everyone should believe in Allah, i.e. God. So that's part and parcel of what makes Yishmael so powerful and so dangerous. And that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about this show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. You can sponsor a shiur. You can sponsor a question and answer. You can submit a question. You can send an email. And that's it for this week. Until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.